Jill Stein released a new ad that I think is straight fire. And I'm not just saying that because I'm supporting Jill Stein. I really do think this ad is straight fire. We're going to start with this ad, and then we're going to get into the speech that she made recently at the rally in Dearborn, Michigan with Abandon Harris. So Jill Stein and Shama Sawant were in Dearborn, Michigan earlier for a rally with the Abandon Harris campaign. And I want to play a Jill speech. But first and foremost, we got to start with this ad.
We have fascism right here and now in the form of the Biden-Harris administration, who are conducting a genocide. There's no greater sign of fascism than genocide. The Democrats are not the solution. They are part of the problem. The American public is with us. The world is with us. And the eyes of the world are watching. And they want to shut down this genocide. They want to end the flow of weapons. They want to end the assault on Lebanon.
The coming Kamala Harris administration, the current Biden administration, they're sending a clear message that genocide is okay.
The world is in agreement on this. The only ones who are not in agreement is our criminal warmongering leadership, who should be in The Hague. They should not be walking the streets of America as the war criminals that they are, responsible for 200,000 murders and 2 million people who are being tortured every day in Gaza.
I support Jill Stein because she's the first presidential candidate that I feel like shares the voice of the Middle Eastern people. We do make up a large portion of this country, but unfortunately it's as if our voices are never heard. And finally, we have a candidate that actually respects who we are.
We have the power to shut this down, to end empire, to end the squandering of our precious tax dollars, which are being spent on endless war after endless war.
For the first time, as Middle Easterners, we feel like our voices are heard from a presidential candidate. Thank you so much.
So awesome. Forget the lesser evil. Fight for the greater good. We have that right here and now in our campaign.
It's very clear that the two-party system is corrupt. Both sides have become a genocidal oligarchy, and we can't stand for it anymore.
Thanks to everyone who's out there in support of ending this genocide in Gaza now.
This is Jill Stein, and I approve this message.
So that was a pretty based ad, and it's obvious that Jill understands like what the American people want, in particular when it comes to this war in Gaza and now Lebanon. Also, Iran is now involved as well. Over 2,000 people have been killed in Lebanon. Over 100 children have been killed recently by Israel. And Israel is doing everything that they set out to do, which is to destroy the countries around them so that they can expand, to genocide the people in Gaza, to push out those in the West Bank, even if they have to, they'll kill them if they have to. And then also now they are doing the same thing in Lebanon. Jill Stein is speaking to this fact. She is telling people about this, but more importantly, she's aligned here with the people in Dearborn, Michigan, with Abandon Harris. Let's hear what she has to say here. And then I'm going to show you a comparison between what she is saying and what she's doing to Biden and Kamala when it comes to Israel. What do the people want?
Free Palestine. Palestine will free us. We refuse to vote for Palestine. Well, let me fix that. We refuse to vote for genocide in Palestine. We refuse. We refuse to be talked into selling our souls, into compromising, into being talked, into affirming, endorsing, and enabling genocide. And when we are asked to please, won't we be quiet? Won't we just shut up and sit down? Won't we just be good little boys and girls? Because truly the Democratic Party owns our votes. They own Muslim votes, they own Black votes, they own youth votes, they own so-called liberal votes. But they don't. They have to earn our votes. Any politician who tells you that they own your vote does not deserve consideration of your vote. The Democrats are running scared, and they should be scared. They could fix this if they wanted. They could win back the Muslim vote. But they would rather lose the election. They would rather lose the election than stop the genocide. This is on them. They want to blame Muslims. They want to blame Greens. They want to blame socialists. They want to blame anybody, but just take the focus off of their genocide. Democrats have been losing votes profoundly. When was the big tipping point? It was actually in 2010 in the midterm elections, when they lost 1,000 seats in state legislatures across the country. They lost 64 seats in Congress. They lost 13 seats in the Senate. They lost 13 governorships.
And they're losing in the Senate right now. Right now, the Republican Party is ahead of the Democratic Party in the Senate. It's 50 to 46, 50 to 44. If the Democratic Party wins those 6 undecided seats in the Senate, it'll be tied 50-50.
Where was the third party to blame that on? There was none. This was the after effect, basically, of the Democrats throwing working people under the bus in the bailouts for Wall Street and the big banks and the mortgage brokers in 2008. They bailed out Wall Street and they threw out the homeowners. Instead of bailing out students and families who badly need a bailout, needed it then and need it now, very much against expressed public opinion. The 2 Democratic houses of Congress and the Obama Democratic White House, a trifecta of Democrats, decided to bail out Wall Street to the tune of trillions of dollars and allow millions of homeowners basically to be thrown out and lose their life savings. So the Democrats were punished. They didn't have any third party to blame it on. There was no spoiler mythology in 2010. They just said they got shellacked and they didn't explain why. And since then, that loss has continued as the Democrats continue to lose votes because they have abandoned working people. And even going back before the Wall Street bailouts, you had Bill Clinton and NAFTA and the loss of millions and millions of workers' jobs. So the Democrats have been throwing working people under the bus for decades, actually. They have no one to blame but themselves.
And that part right there, I think, is incredibly true. They want to point fingers at everybody else. They want to point fingers at Jill Stein, Cornel West, Claudia de Cruz. They want to point fingers at you. They want to point fingers at me, everybody else but theirself. Because they completely abandoned the working class. Look at it. Reminder, the Teamsters decided not to endorse the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party was really took it some kind of way. Like, how dare you not do? Nobody owes you anything.
This is why they cannot discuss the issues, because they are not standing up for their traditional base. As Joe Biden said in the 2020 race, he said that nothing will change. He reassured the Wall Street donors that nothing will change. And indeed, what changed? Well, the billionaires got even richer. They doubled and even tripled their wealth during COVID, while ordinary working people were pushed further and further into poverty. Child poverty rates have tripled, in fact, in the last 3 years. That data just came out. Over 60% of workers are living paycheck to paycheck. Some 87 million Americans do not have adequate health insurance. Some 18 million could not afford their pharmaceuticals. Some 8 million were pushed into poverty just trying to afford their health care alone. You have young people, according to polls now, 50% are saying they are hopeless about the future, and a quarter of young people are saying that they in fact have considered harming themselves in just the last 2 weeks before that poll. So this is not a world that is working for working people in this country. And that goes hand in hand with the endless war machine, which is conducting war and genocide, specifically in the Middle East, but wars all over the world. And in fact, we have seen a whole series of catastrophic wars since 9/11 that have cost US taxpayers some $20 trillion, according to Brown University Cost of War Project. In the last year alone, these are numbers crunched by Jeffrey Sachs at the Columbia University Economics Department, that we have spent, the average American household has spent in the last year some $12,000 alone on the endless war machine.
And they expect us to not push back or have any type of a say-so about how our tax dollars are spent. That's the thing that's really interesting to me. They don't want you to protest against these wars and say, how dare you push back against that? Oh, you must be some type of Putin puppet or something like that. As if we can't be upset about that. That's the thing that drives me crazy. I don't have the right to complain about that. How many of you want your tax dollars spent to war? How many of you want that? How many of you would prefer if your tax dollars went to something right here in the US that would help out the American people instead of being used overseas to kill people?
It's 50% and more of our congressional budget. This is costing us big time at home. It's impoverishing us at home. This is why they tell us we don't have the money for the victims of Hurricane Helene. This is why people are isolated. This is why people do not have the food and the water and the electricity that they need in the wake of the third worst hurricane on record in American history. This is why we are not fixing that problem at its source. We need to start phasing out fossil fuels. It's great to create renewables, but we need to end fossil fuels. And in fact, we need public ownership and public management and public accountability for the fossil fuel industry, for the banking industry. We need public banks. We need public management and ownership, likewise, of transportation. There's no
public banks. That's a big one, you guys. The public banking. You know that North Dakota has a public bank. It's called the Bank of North Dakota. They're kind of hush about it. They don't want to do interviews about it. I tried. But this is the reason why, part of the reason why North Dakota didn't suffer during the 2008 housing crisis the way that other states did. They had a public bank. And there should be more push for that. You don't hear Kamala Harris talking about a public bank. You don't hear Donald Trump talking about a public bank. You know, they don't want you to know about these things. You're really not supposed to know about it. Most people, again, how many of you been to North Dakota? Most of us probably haven't, right? Right. So our government really does not want you to know about public banking. That's why you don't hear them talk about it.
No way that we will have a national rail system unless we are actually coordinating that on a public basis. We also need public housing with public ownership of this critical resource. Back in the Clinton administration, they passed the so-called Fair Cloth Amendment. There was nothing fair about it. It basically prohibited any further expenditures on public housing, which is absolutely critical if we are truly going to meet the urgent and dire needs of housing in this country. Some 50% of Americans now who rent their housing are severely economically stressed, paying 30 to 50% and more of their income just to keep a roof over their heads, which doesn't leave much to pay your student loans or your car insurance or your healthcare costs and so on. We have a housing emergency in this country right now, and we can solve that right now, by the way. We can solve that by creating rent control at the federal level across the whole country to stop the gentrification, to stop the continuing displacement.
Not to mention, for most people, when you get paid, most of your money goes to what? It goes to rent. It goes to your mortgage. It goes to your housing costs.
We need a tenant bill of rights so that renters are not arbitrarily evicted, so that their landlords can just raise the rent and gentrify the communities.
Yep.
In Europe, many countries are building what's now called social housing, which is mixed income. It's permanent. It's housing that's in the public domain. We need a counterweight to the private housing industry, which is driven by luxury housing and big profits for big developers. We need public housing that will meet our needs.
I want to talk about that mixed income housing. When I was in Montreal recently, I finally did like an actual tour, which I had never done since every time I go up there. But I did an actual tour, and they took us across the bridge from the downtown, and they took us to a neighborhood, and they said, this is another part of Montreal. This used to be just all housing projects. And they said, but now you can't do that anymore in Montreal. Like, now you have to have mixed economic housing. So there is no such like, this is the ghetto, this is the, the poor side of town, this is the hood or whatever. It's not a thing. Like, they have mixed economic housing. So think about that. If we did have that in the US, then people would have those zip codes that would end up getting more resources. People would have the zip codes that would get more resources for those public schools. Because that's the reality. If you live in a neighborhood where the income is significantly low, then obviously that means that, again, property taxes go towards public school. So that means that the public schools in that neighborhood are going to be under-resourced and underfunded. But if you create that rule that they created in Montreal, Canada now, where you cannot do that, where you have to have mixed income housing, well, then you're talking about these schools being able to get more resources. So then it's not all about your zip code. That's a good point. I'm glad she brought that up.
And that housing also needs to be environmentally sound and based on renewable energy. This is why, as part of our Green New Deal, we also call for environmentally sound housing and the building of 15 million new units of affordable housing through the public housing and social housing. And by the way, on day one, we will declare a climate emergency on day one, because we have a climate emergency. If Hurricane Helene did not make that point for you, then just look at the Colorado River, which is very close to shutting down. And the Colorado River supplies the water for California agriculture, which supplies half of the fruits and vegetables for the entire nation. So California, that's another one. Where do people think that California gets that from? The Colorado River is especially important, and a lot of people don't talk about it because a lot of people don't know about it. You think you've seen food inflation? Well, just wait until the Colorado River shuts down, which could be in the next 1 to 2 years. The Washington Post ran a headline last year calling it the doomsday scenario on the Colorado River. And we don't hear about this much from the corporate press, which is why another thing that we will do on day one, if we are so lucky as to turn the White House into a greenhouse and make the world a better place, we will also on day one undertake an antitrust lawsuit against the corporatized, consolidated media so that we can break up big media.
Yes.
So that the media is no longer dominated by the apologists for power. We need watchdog media, not lapdog media. It's hard to come by in this day and age.
And that's what we really have. We have the media that is going to sit up there and carry water for certain politicians. It's ridiculous.
But thanks, of course, to all those who are here today to cover this event. Thank you to the press for being the exception to the rule by covering what's going on here. And let me again just say why this is so important and give a big thank you, especially to Abandon Biden, to Workers Strike Back, and to Dearborn, and to everyone who is here today. We are ground zero. We are the moral compass that is saying no to genocide, that is saying no to endless empire and its endless war machine. We are saying no to oligarchy. We are saying no to rising fascism, which is a serious problem, not just waiting for Donald Trump. It's happening right now here under Democrats with cop cities, with the war on freedom of the press, the war on freedom of speech, the war on the freedom to protest. Cop cities are happening under many Democratic municipal administrations across the country. We're seeing some 70 to 80 cop cities being built. We are seeing the training of local police now by the Israeli Defense Forces, teaching these abusive tactics for those who've been subjected to them. It's absolutely outrageous, criminal, and dehumanizing, and we need to put an end to it. Let me also say another action item on day one is to instruct the Department of Justice, our Green Department of Justice, to take AIPAC to court as a violation of the Foreign Agent Registration Act. And for those who are not convinced, I highly recommend that you see the recent investigative reporting that was done by Li Fang, formerly of The Intercept, now independent. His investigation of nonprofit organizations in this country who are actually funded by the Knesset, by money coming directly from Israel to nonprofit organizations in this country in order to change legislation, in order to change rules on campuses. Why is it that we suddenly have this ocean of repression on campuses or an ocean of anti-BDS legislation around the country? This is not coming from nowhere. This is funded. This is action on behalf of a foreign government, and the money is actually coming from the foreign government.
100%, which is why AIPAC should have to register as a foreign agent. We should not have Congress members walking around in the halls of Congress wearing an IDF uniform, which does happen. We need to make some hardcore lines here, folks, and I'm just keeping it real with you. Either it's not right to represent another foreign entity, or it isn't. And the whole thing about, well, Israel's different because they represent our interests. No. Israel is not the United States. And it is really interesting that the state of Israel, something so tiny, can have so much control, and how our politicians can just sit back and just let it happen because they're all bought in. They're all bought and paid for. And you have a few that may be able to speak up that are not aligned with AIPAC, that do not receive donor money from them or from the Israeli lobby altogether. But the reality is most of them do. And had they had to register as a foreign agent, we wouldn't be in this situation, which is something that JFK actually wanted to happen. JFK wanted AIPAC to register as a foreign agent. And if that would have happened, we wouldn't be in this situation.
Not necessarily all of it, but lots of it. So I recommend anybody who has questions about what's going on here to go to the source. The main thing I want to say here, I want to quote first Frederick Douglass, who said that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. We are that demand. Don't listen to anyone who tells you to sit down and shut up and just take marching orders from the Democratic Party. And further, in the words of Alice Walker, and I paraphrase her a little bit, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. Yep. We have it, and what you see happening here today is part of that. This is exactly why the Democrats fought so hard to keep us off the ballot. This is why they were publicly advertising, shamefully publicly advertising for infiltrators and disruptors and spies. They were publicly advertising they did job postings for people to manage infiltrators and spies on our campaign. They also hijacked our public funding and held onto it for months while we were conducting our ballot drives. And they caused some trouble on that front. But this is why they are running scared. They are running scared because they know that their days are numbered. Their days of genocide are numbered because 68% of Americans, according to a poll done even back in November, already oppose the genocide and demand an immediate ceasefire. And since then, 61% of Americans demand an immediate weapons embargo, and we must have that. And I strongly echo the remarks made earlier today that the longshoremen really need to be urged by us to stand up and to be the source. You know, it is working people. It is working people organized at the workplace in their unions that bring our moral vision, our moral compass to the political and economic reality. And boycott, divestment, and sanctions has been enormously effective. Yep. Israel is in deep trouble on many fronts, both militarily and economically. And some of that is because of the contracts that are being canceled, most recently at MIT. MIT, the home of so much of the military-industrial complex, canceled a major contract. And this is undoubtedly why so many heads are being bashed in campuses around the country.
They canceled the contract with Lockheed Martin, and I covered that story. It's interesting, though. I paid attention. A lot of people in independent media did not cover that story. I think it may have just flew under the radar, but that's a big deal, you know? So corporate media is telling you that Netanyahu's winning or he's gaining ground, but they're leaving out important things that are happening that I think you do need to know about that can point to and show you the other ways that Israel is losing. And I would say that Israel's reputation has been completely destroyed across the world.
Because so many campuses are being funded by military contracts, which again gets to why we are here. We are here to create an America and a world that works for all of us. Step one is to stop the genocide. And every vote that is cast for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or RFK, because he's still on the ballot in some states, many states actually, every vote is an endorsement of genocide. Every vote for our campaign is a shot across the bow of the empire, telling them that we are here, we are organized, we are not going away, this genocide will be ended. And again, on day one of our administration, in fact, even before day one, on the day of the election, we would pick up the phone and tell Bibi Netanyahu that his genocidal war is over. And that would not only end the genocide in Gaza, that would end the war that is expanding right now into the West Bank, into Lebanon, into Yemen, into Syria, into Iran. This is unbelievably dangerous for all of us. And all of this goes away the minute the genocide is over. It's not like it's rocket science. It's not like Biden and Harris don't have the power to end it. They claim to be working diligently night and day for a ceasefire, but actually we know from the revelations published in Politico the other day that what they're working for is the expanding war. They have been working to encourage Israel to move forward and attack Lebanon. So they are not doing what they say, but they do have the power. We must hold them to account because it's simple. It is a simple matter, as Amr was saying earlier in the program. It's not complicated. It's simple. We have the moral imperative to end this genocide. We have the popular support, and we have the means to end this genocide by picking up the phone and telling Bibi Netanyahu it's over, just as Ronald Reagan did in the 1980s. And it doesn't.
That's a very good point. Again, we got to continue to mention the Ronald Reagan piece, right? Because what that shows you is that the Democratic Party today has moved to the right of Ronald Reagan. This is why you see the Dick Cheneys come on into Kamala Harris's, applaud Kamala and say, I'm going to support you. This is why you're seeing Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, all these random Joe Schmo warmongering people jump on board because the Democratic Party has now moved to the right of Ronald Reagan when it comes to war. This is insane. Insane. And I wonder if any of you who were old enough to vote like during the early 80s, which I was not, I was a baby, but if any of you were old enough to vote for the president during the early 80s, like when Ronald Reagan did run, I'm curious to hear from you. Like, what do you see that's different now? I mean, the fact that he was able to pick up the phone and just say, whoa, this is too much, cut it out, stop. And our country has become more and more hawkish on war.
And there, which is why our movement does not end. Our movement does not end on election day. And whatever we do, it is a victory. It is a victory whether we are 2% or 5% or 15% or 26%, which can win a four-way race. Remember, in the last presidential election, 1 out of every 3 eligible voters voted with their feet by declining to vote for the parties of war and Wall Street being rammed down our throats back then and now as well. So 1 out of 3 voters is enough to win a 3-way and a 4-way race. So I would not accept as written in stone that we are not going to the White House. I wouldn't accept anything in this election that has defied all expectations. We aim as high as we deserve to go.
And we'll go ahead and wrap it there because I want to show you the comparison. Now I just want to compare what Jill said to what Joe Biden said here. Listen to this. I want you to hear the difference.
Thank you, Karine. Thank you so much, Mr. President, for being here. This week, Senator Chris Murphy said it's certainly a possibility that the Israeli government is not going to sign any diplomatic agreement prior to the election, which is what you have been calling for so long, potentially to try to influence the result. Do you agree? Do you have any worries that Netanyahu may be trying to influence the election and that's why he has not agreed to a diplomatic solution?
No administration has helped Israel more than I have. None. None. None.
None. No administration has helped Israel more than he has. Hold on to that. Then you have Kamala Harris, which, by the way, she was ratioed for this tweet. I want to show you the ratio first. This tweet here that she tweeted yesterday, 14,000 likes, 46,000 comments. She was ratioed here. This was disgusting. The people of Lebanon are facing an increasingly dire humanitarian situation. I'm concerned about the security and well-being of the civilians suffering in Lebanon and will continue working to help meet the needs of all civilians there. To that end, The U.S. will provide nearly 157 million in additional assistance to the people of Lebanon for essential needs such as food, shelter, water, protection, and sanitation to help those who have been displaced by the recent conflict. This additional support brings total U.S. assistance to Lebanon over the last year to over $385 million. You know why she got ratioed? Because people know that she's full of it. How are you going to sit up here and say that you're concerned about the humanitarian crisis in Lebanon when you gave Israel the weapons to do it? And when I say she was ratio, like, I'm not kidding. I don't think she was expecting this, because I was just kind of like, let me come here. Can I go to, oh, they won't let me do see retweets on here. I used to be able to just go to there's retweets and comments. But anyway, if you were to look at, oh, it's gonna let me comment. If you were to look at the comments, like people, and it's not just, and that's the thing. Some people are Republican. Oh, look, there's me. Stop lying. You sent them the weapons. That's me. Jesus. Ooh, Jake Shields said we send billions to Israel to bomb Lebanon, then millions to Lebanon to rebuild. How does this make sense? Like, people are really, and then I believe, oh, Ben Norton, that was the other one I wanted to show you as well. Ben Norton says, the people of Lebanon wouldn't need humanitarian assistance if the Israeli colonial regime weren't invading their country with full U.S. support and bombing and shelling their cities with U.S. weapons and ammunition. So again, it shows you here, Biden-Harris is giving Israel billions of dollars of weapons to massacre civilians in Lebanon. They 100% support Israel's criminal invasion of Lebanon. So you can see it here. And there's a number of things he points to. Biden sends it a record amount of aid all the way. See how much money they're getting? You see that? That's up to over, 18 billion? Israel bombed Lebanon today, killing hundreds, with the U.S. is sending more bombs. You see this? Again, all the receipts. Israel says it has secured $8.7 billion in U.S. military aid. Again, senior White House figures privately told Israel that the U.S. would support its decision to ramp up military pressure against Hezbollah. So this is all backed by the U.S., and that's why she was clowned for that idiotic statement that she made on Twitter. But people have had enough. And I want to show you this here, this poll. Peter Dow shared this. New Gallup poll. 69% of independents, 53% of Democrats, and 48% of Republicans want a third party. Because the Republican and Democratic parties do such a poor job of representing the American people. Support for third party among Democrats is up 13% since 2022. I'm not kidding. You can see it here for yourself. This is insane. Independence is the dotted green line here. And Republicans is the red line, obviously. And Democrats is the blue line here. So people want other options. And the Democratic Party knows that. And the protest should show you that. Because, see, this is the tone deafness of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Jill is present at these events. Claudia's been present. Cornell has been present at these protests. You would never catch Kamala Harris here. Now, this was yesterday. Now, remember, there were thousands, tens of thousands marched across the United States as part of an International Action Day for Palestine. October 7th is tomorrow. October 7th is Monday. Well, I'll have this clip for Monday. So if you see this Monday, you're going to be like, October 7th is today. But there we go. It's been a year. Kamala Harris knows what the people want. But instead of going for what the people want, anything to stay on the good side of AIPAC, anything to stay on the good side of our donors. These politicians don't mean anything and don't really plan to do anything. Kamala Harris is just there to be an empty suit to say that she's not Donald Trump. And a majority of Americans, a lot of them will fall for it. and they'll feel like they really did something. By going to the poll and supporting Kamala Harris, they'll say, well, at least I didn't get Donald Trump. Only to realize that she's going to be even more hawkish when it comes to war. She's not going to be what you think she is going to be, and her record will show you that. You'll be looking at another Obama presidency, only this time even more hawkish when it comes to war. So that's where the Democratic Party is at. So when people try to shame you for wanting to vote third party, you should tell them they need to point their fingers at the leadership of the Democratic Party and the donor class that have made it that way.